German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has warned Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu against his plans for a ground offensive in Rafah. The two leaders met in West Jerusalem. Scholz urged Netanyahu to protect civilians in Gaza and highlighted the need for desperately needed humanitarian aid. He said the world cannot stand by as Palestinians risk starvation.
The longer the war lasts, the higher the number of civilian casualties rises, the more desperate the situation of the people in Gaza become, the more this begs the question, no matter how important the goal, can it justify such terribly high costs? Or are there other ways to achieve your goal? Take the ground offensive in Rafah. The military logic is one consideration, but there is a humanitarian logic as well. How should more than 1.5 million people be protected? Where should they go?
We've just had, I think, a very serious conversation, an important conversation among friends. You expressed your concerns for two things. One, protecting civilians, and second, provision of humanitarian aid. And I explained that these are our concerns as well, because we agree with both goals.
Meanwhile, the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has echoed Scholz's sentiments during a visit to Cairo.
We are all extremely concerned about the war in Gaza and the unfolding catastrophic humanitarian situation. Gaza is facing famine, and it is critical to achieve an agreement on a ceasefire rapidly now that frees the hostages and allows more humanitarian aid to reach Gaza. And we are very concerned about the risks of a full-scale offensive in Rafah that would be devastating for vulnerable civilian population.
Let's bring in Marwan Bashara, Al Jazeera's senior political analyst. He's joining us live from Paris. Good to see you, Marwan. So, strong comments on the face of it from Scholz, from von der Leyen. But do you think they'll put any real pressure on Netanyahu?
Well, listen to what Netanyahu just said. I'm sure our viewers around the world have heard what I heard. Netanyahu is, of course, concerned for civilian life in Gaza. And, of course, he is concerned for humanitarian aid to Gaza. I mean, if that's not comical, I don't know what is. Of course, it's also tragic that the Israeli Prime Minister can continue to lie, despite being told once and again by his Western allies from Germany, Brussels, and Washington that something got to give, that the price is too high, that the scenes are too disturbing for Western public opinion, that Palestinian death is no longer workable as a policy. But again, when you listen to von der Leyen saying we cannot stand by as children die, really? 5 months, 20,000 children and women killed, and von der Leyen stands there and says, we cannot stand by while children die, while they were complicit for 5 months in the killing of Palestinian children? It's really astounding. It's shocking. It's deceptive. It's a circus, what we see happening in Cairo and Tel Aviv, with Western allies pretending to be humanitarian in this regard.
Why do you think they are making these statements, and how much do you think that Netanyahu is emboldened by the fact that, Scholz said Israel has our full support, but then said the cost of the war has been too high on Palestinians, which is, sounds a lot like what US President Joe Biden said earlier this month when asked about red lines. Why the mixed messages?
That's exactly what Biden has said. European leaders are simply parroting what the American leaders are saying. They're not inventing the wheel. They're not expressing any independent policy of the United States. The same public pressure that Western leaders are facing, whether in this side of the Atlantic or that side of the Atlantic, adds up to more of the same. It just looks too bad now. The hypocrisy is too great. The double standard is incredible. It's the same von der Leyen that supported Ukraine against Russia, but supported Israel genocide in Palestine. Their double standard and hypocrisy is beyond belief. They're parroting the American lies because the American president told them to do so. Washington is on a pressure spree. They want Netanyahu to wage the war the way they want him to wage the war, not the way the Israeli government of fanatics and fascists want to wage the war. But it's going to be war nonetheless, whether it is waged American style or Israeli style. Yes, Hopefully there will be. I can't believe I'm saying hopefully. But yes, less civilian casualties, the better. The quicker the war winds down, the better. The quicker we can get to a ceasefire, of course, it's better for everyone involved. But the Netanyahu government is not feeling any pressure, only hearing words and more words. But when it comes to deeds, the West is doing nothing to stop that genocidal war.
And yet they're saying...
And
yet they're saying that the situation is not acceptable. So if Germany, if the European Union don't want a ground offensive in Rafah, like they keep saying that they don't want a ground offensive in Rafah to go ahead, do you think we might see them use sanctions more than words against Israel?
No sanctions, no sanctions. I mean, we've heard the same again and again. You know, we've been bit from that same poisonous bite already in the past 5 months. Remember when they were talking against land invasion on the 3rd week of October, but the same happened, genocide followed. Then they said Israel will respect human rights, and if it doesn't, then something gotta give. Nothing gave. Israel continues to get the support, but it gets criticism. Sometimes it gets some kind of, you know what, you need to do this, that, and the other thing. But it's not followed with deeds. It's not followed with sanctions. It's not followed with pressures. It's just words. And Netanyahu has already made clear today, past 24 hours, that he's not going to submit to that kind of diplomatic pressure by Israel's allies, that he's going to continue with business as usual, killing, slaughter in Gaza, Rafah included.
And so how then, Marwan, does this complete lack of any real international pressure bode for those ceasefire negotiations that are going to continue in Doha on Monday with the head of Israel's intelligence agency traveling to Doha? What are the prospects then for peace?
Okay, let me tell you why this is important, right? It's because Israel doesn't mind a transitional ceasefire, a ceasefire for a number of weeks, whereby a lot of the captives are released, and they try to figure out what to do about Rafah, how they can be able to place the Palestinians once again. Because as things stand today, Hamas leadership is not capitulating. Hamas fighters are not raising their hands in surrenders, and the Palestinians in Gaza are not rising against Hamas. And hence Israel wants to take its time. And since there is pressure, it will accept a temporary ceasefire whereby it can reorganize and get a lot of these captives released. After that, according to the Israeli officials, they want to continue with the war.
Marwan, thank you as always. That is our senior political analyst, Marwan Bashara in Paris.